Welcome to the debate. When a Formula One engineer looks at a telemetry screen, they see a perfectly predictable universe.
Yeah, a very clean, very binary world.
Exactly, a binary world of physics. They see aerodynamic load distributed across a carbon fiber floor, tire degradation curves mapped perfectly on an XY axis. They see precise lateral G-forces sustained through high-speed corners. To the pit wall, racing is it's just math.
Right, until the visor goes down.
Exactly. The second the red lights go out, that flawless mathematical equation is suddenly injected with adrenaline, with fear, and, with human frailty. And the 2026 Formula One Miami Grand Prix was nothing short of a spectacle in that regard.
Oh, it was an absolute thriller. Pure chaos.
Yeah, a punishing mix of safety cars, bold strategic gambles, and high-profile accidents that just completely scrambled the running order.
But I think, and this is crucial, it exposed a massive fracture in how we actually understand modern Formula One.
Which brings us right to the center of our discussion today. The 2026 regulation adjustments have fundamentally altered the DNA of these cars. They've restricted aerodynamic development in very specific areas, creating this highly constrained playground for the engineers.
A very tight box to operate in, yeah.
Right. So the central question emerging from the absolute mountain of data we generated in Miami is this: are race outcomes in this new era primarily dictated by technical upgrades and aerodynamic development, or is the ultimate hierarchy decided by raw driver execution and psychological resilience?
It's the ultimate man versus machine question.
It really is. And I'll be taking the stance that, based on the evidence we saw across the grid, technical packages and car upgrades were the definitive, undeniable factor in the weekend's results.
And I look at the exact same data, at the exact same telemetry, and arrive at the complete opposite conclusion. I'm going to argue that human fallibility, psychological pressure, and just pure driver execution completely subverted the technical spreadsheets in Miami.
You really think so?
Absolutely. The human element remains the ultimate, untamable variable in this sport. I mean, the machines are fast, but the minds are fragile.
Well, let's start with the macro picture of the Miami Grand Prix then. Because when you look at the grid from a wide lens, this weekend was fundamentally a showcase of engineering dominance. I mean, it was a technical progression masterclass.
If you ignore the drivers, maybe.
Hold on, hear me out, because these 2026 regulations have heavily restricted what teams can do with the upper body work, right? So the development race beneath the surface, specifically the floor, is the absolute arbiter of success now. Just look at who succeeded.
Okay, let's look.
Red Bull brought a massive aerodynamic update. They completely changed their airflow concept, and it instantly brought Max Verstappen back to the front row of the grid. McLaren delivered a sweeping new package that put both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri squarely on the podium.
Well, Piastri barely made it, but yes.
But he made it, proving their factory correlation, their ability to match wind tunnel data to track reality is just championship caliber right now. Even down the grid, Williams brought crucial upgrades and walked away with double points. Track position was dictated by factory output, period.
You're giving the factory all the credit, but you're completely ignoring how utterly that factory output was wasted by the very people driving the cars.
Wasted?
Yes, wasted. I look at Miami and I see engineering advantages repeatedly nullified by human factors. You mentioned Red Bull's brilliant aero package bringing Verstappen to the front row, right?
Because it did. It fixed the car.
But what actually happened on lap 1? Verstappen suffered an incredibly uncharacteristic spin. He got greedy on the throttle, the rear stepped out, and he dropped all the way to 9th place. He threw that $1 million aerodynamic advantage straight into the garbage in turn 3.
Okay, that's one instance.
But it's not just him. Charles Leclerc had the pace for a comfortable podium. The Ferrari was hooked up, but he pushed his worn tires too hard, lost the rear, and binned his car right into the wall.
The pressure was immense there, though.
Exactly my point. Even KIMY Antonelli, who secured the victory, botched his start and made glaring errors in the sprint race. The cars are undeniably fast, yes, but in these new regulations, the driver's mental fortitude and tactical execution are the true differentiators. The human mind is breaking long before the carbon fiber does.
All right, let's test that theory right at the very front of the grid, with the battle for the win between Mercedes and McLaren.
Let's do it.
McLaren's upgrades were wildly successful, we agree on that. Norris was able to build a 2-second lead at the front of the pack very early on. And in modern Formula One, pulling a 2-second gap in clean air means your car is efficiently generating downforce without shredding the tires.
It's a very fast chassis. No one is denying McLaren's engineering.
Right. It proves the chassis is fundamentally a championship-caliber weapon. But the reason Kimi Antonelli secured his third consecutive victory isn't just about his raw talent behind the wheel. It was largely due to the Mercedes pit wall executing a flawless, just devastating 2-second undercut.
The undercut is a strategic call, yes, but it relies entirely on the driver to actually execute it.
But understand the mechanism of what Mercedes did there. An undercut isn't just, deciding to pit early. It's a mathematical trap.
A trap the driver has to spring.
Let me finish. Mercedes pulled Antonelli in for fresh rubber, knowing exactly what the thermal warm-up curve of that tire would be. They relied on the sheer baseline pace of the Mercedes W17 to give him the mechanical grip needed to lay down an outlap so blisteringly fast that when Norris finally pitted a lap later, Antonelli had completely leapfrogged him.
Right.
That strategic call, backed by the sheer aerodynamic efficiency of the car, won the race. The operational and technical machinery of that team is currently carrying a 19-year-old to race victories.
Carrying him? That is absurd. You cannot separate the execution of an undercut from the driver sitting in the cockpit.
But the math dictated the outcome.
The pit wall can run all the Monte Carlo simulations they want. They can look at thermal tire curves on their laptops until they're blue in the face. But the driver has to physically deliver that outlap.
True, but...
And remember, driving out of the pit lane on unheated tires, which the 2026 regulations strictly enforce now, feels like driving on ice. The driver has to navigate that under immense, suffocating pressure without locking a brake or snapping the rear. Antonelli did that.
He did. But the car gave him the grip.
But look at the rest of his weekend. He dropped 2 places right at the start because he braked too deep into turn 1 and locked up. He made a litany of youthful errors during the sprint race. He won because of his raw talent in navigating those high-pressure moments when it mattered most. Not just because the car is some, magical rocket ship.
Listen, if the car is the instrument, the driver is merely the musician. And right now the Mercedes and McLaren instruments are so finely tuned that they forgive a missed note.
Forgive a missed note. These cars are beasts.
But they have the baseline load. Antonelli can botch a start, he can make an error in the sprint, but the baseline aerodynamic load of that Mercedes gives him the grip to recover. But wait, I have to push back on your framing here.
Go ahead.
If driver execution is the only thing that matters, how do you explain George Russell?
Oh, George is a perfect example for my side.
How?
He is in the exact same world-beating Mercedes machinery as Antonelli. Yet Russell completely ruined his weekend with a qualifying error, fell behind early, and just languished in 6th place.
Exactly. Wait, a highly experienced team leader is struggling while a teenager thrives. Isn't it simply that Russell hasn't figured out the setup window of the specific aerodynamic upgrade package? It's an engineering mismatch.
Russell's struggles are the exact proof of my point. Let's talk about what a setup window actually is in these 2026 regulations.
It's the ride height and suspension stiffness?
Yes, but the rules were rewritten to remove a lot of the underfloor aerodynamic safety nets. That means the window where the car actually generates predictable downforce is incredibly narrow. The ride height has to be perfect, the suspension stiffness has to be bone-jarring.
Right, which makes it an engineering problem.
No, it makes it a psychological problem. If a driver cannot mentally adapt to the specific, harsh feedback the car is giving them through the steering wheel and the seat, they drown. Russell is drowning because he cannot execute what the rigid mechanics of the car demand.
So you're saying Antonelli is just, ignoring the harshness?
Antonelli, with the fresh, unburdened psychology of a rookie, is driving purely on instinct and extracting the lap time. He hasn't spent years relying on the old regulations. The car isn't forgiving Antonelli's missed notes. Antonelli is simply playing a wildly difficult composition better than his veteran teammate.
Well, let's move from the Mercedes garage over to the reigning champion. Because the Red Bull situation challenges both of our frameworks, I think.
It really does. It was a bizarre weekend for them.
Coming into Miami, Red Bull was on a very clear downward trajectory.
They were bleeding time in the high-speed corners, so they introduced extensive changes, a massive overhaul to the floor geometry and the side pod profiling.
Right, they completely reworked the Venturi tunnels.
Exactly. And suddenly, the aerodynamic grip is just back. The car is sucked to the track again. Verstappen secures a front-row start and leads the early meters of the race. The engineering fixed the core problem. The data they saw in the Milton Keynes wind tunnel correlated perfectly to the track in Miami, and their performance ceiling was instantly restored.
Restored and then immediately squandered.
Oh, come on.
It was. The engineering fix was rendered completely irrelevant the moment Verstappen spun off the track. All those millions of dollars in wind tunnel development, all those late nights at the factory analyzing airflow, gone in a cloud of tire smoke because the human being got greedy on the throw.
It was a snap of oversteer.
Caused by his right foot, he dropped all the way down to 9th place. But more importantly, Verstappen's true brilliance in Miami wasn't his qualifying pace on the new aero package.
What was it then?
It was what he did after the spin. We saw a heroic, absolutely grueling 50-lap stint on the hard compound tires after a lap 6 safety car pit stop.
It was a long stint, yeah.
To physically manage those tires, defend his track position, and fight his way back up the grid, that is pure, unadulterated human execution. You can't program a computer to do that in traffic. Okay, I see the romance in framing that as driver heroism. It sounds great on a broadcast. But isn't a 50-lap stint on hard tires fundamentally an engineering triumph of Red Bull's tire degradation management?
How so? The driver modulates the slip.
The driver is executing the lap time delta, yes. But tire degradation is a thermal equation. If the suspension geometry and aerodynamic balance of that Red Bull were inherently sliding the rear of the car, overheating the surface of the tire, Verstappen couldn't have made it 20 laps, let alone 50.
But
no, think about it. The car's mechanical ability to keep the tire in its precise thermal operating window, preventing it from melting on the surface or dropping out of temperature, is what actually allowed him to run that marathon strategy.
You can have the most brilliant suspension geometry in the world, but if the driver leans on the traction zones 5% too hard, the tire blisters.
Blistering is manageable if the car is balanced.
Blistering isn't a factory issue. It's a right foot issue. It happens when the driver overheats the core of the rubber, causing chunks of the tire to literally tear away. Verstappen had to perfectly modulate his throttle application out of every single low-speed corner for 50 laps.
With the help of the car's traction.
He had to manually shift his brake bias corner by corner to protect the front tires from locking. That is mental endurance. And if you want the perfect counterexample of what happens when a driver fails that exact test, look at Charles Leclerc.
Ah, Leclerc. Yeah, that was definitely a turning point in the race.
Ferrari gave him a car with genuine, undeniable podium pace. Leclerc had the speed.
He did. The Ferrari was fast all weekend.
But the psychological pressure of Oscar Piastri hunting him down completely broke him. He pushed his worn tires just slightly over the limit in the closing stages of the race. He demanded more grip than the physics of the tire could provide, lost the rear, spun, and impacted the wall.
It was a harsh mistake.
The Ferrari had the mechanical capability to be on the podium. The driver failed the execution test.
Leclerc's error was incredibly costly, I'll give you that. But even his necessity to be pushing that hard was dictated by Ferrari's relative lack of technical progression compared to McLaren.
Are you saying the crash is the factory's fault?
I'm saying Leclerc was overdriving because he had to mathematically compensate for the fact that McLaren brought a superior upgrade package. When the engineering falls short, the driver is forced to operate beyond the limit of adhesion.
He chose to push over the limit.
He was trying to make up in the braking zones what the car lacked in aerodynamic efficiency. If the Ferrari had the downforce of the McLaren, he wouldn't have been sliding the rear in the first place.
Which perfectly proves how the regulations have created an environment where the cars are incredibly difficult to drive on the absolute limit. Leclerc knew the math.
Exactly. He knew he was losing time.
He knew Piastri was coming on fresher tires. He let the psychological pressure of defending that podium position force him into a critical error. The engineering set the stage, yes, but human psychology wrote the ending.
Well, if a championship contender like Leclerc is cracking under the mental load of these cars, imagine being a rookie in the midfield fighting for your career.
Oh, it's brutal down there.
That pressure cooker is where we really see the 2026 regulations bite. And when we look at the lower point scoring positions in Miami, it feels purely like a reflection of factory output.
How so? The midfield was chaos.
Look at Williams. They successfully brought vital upgrades, specifically shedding a significant amount of weight from their chassis. And in Formula One, shedding weight directly impacts rotational inertia. It makes the car change direction faster, it accelerates quicker.
True. Weight is everything.
They instantly scored double points with Alex Albon finishing 10th and Franco Colapinto securing points as well. Conversely, look at the teams that stagnated in the factory.
Aston Martin.
Exactly. Aston Martin brought virtually no upgrades, leaving a two-time world champion like Fernando Alonso struggling on a bizarre 40-lap stint on medium tires just to finish 17th.
That strategy was a nightmare.
And Audi suffered disastrous mechanical failures, with Nico Hülkenberg retiring early due to a power unit issue. The midfield hierarchy was dictated entirely by who bolted the best parts onto their cars on Thursday.
I just don't think you can give the factory all the credit there. Let's look closely at Franco Colapinto for a second.
Okay.
He drove a stellar weekend, arguably his best in Formula One. He outqualified Pierre Gasly, he managed a massive 31-lap first stint on a track that absolutely eats rear tires, and he raced with incredible aggression and maturity.
Because the Williams was lighter.
That success wasn't just about a lighter chassis. It was driven by the immense psychological boost and confidence provided by getting that new equipment. He felt backed by the team, he felt the support, and it elevated his mental game.
So the upgrade worked.
Yes, but psychologically, you have to contrast Colapinto's mental clarity with the sheer psychological breakdown we saw elsewhere in the midfield.
You're referring to the cascade of incidents with the junior drivers, I assume?
Precisely. Look at Isaac Hadjar. He had a completely ruined weekend, crashed into the wall, and was literally punching his steering wheel in sheer frustration. The pressure broke him.
It was hard to watch, honestly.
Or Liam Lawson aggressively crashing out Gasly in a totally avoidable incident that earned him penalty points and universal condemnation from the paddock.
A massive misjudgment.
The midfield isn't just a wind tunnel test. It is a psychological pressure cooker. These drivers are fighting to keep their seats for next year, and when the pressure mounts, they are snapping. Colapinto succeeded because his mind was right. Hadjar and Lawson failed because they let the red mist descend and overrode their own talent.
The emotional volatility of the midfield is very real, I'll acknowledge that. But let's look at the actual performance data of those recovering from the chaos.
All right, let's see the data.
You mentioned Audi's disastrous weekend. Despite the team's absolute reliability chaos, despite his teammate's engine expiring in a cloud of smoke, rookie Gabriel Bortoleto managed to recover 9 places in the race.
He had a great drive.
He started near the back and fought his way up to 12th. He executed well, yes, but he could only do that because the baseline power unit and chassis of that Audi, when it actually holds together, has a higher performance ceiling than the cars he was passing.
When it holds together being the operative phrase.
But even in a chaotic weekend, the baseline engineering dictates the ceiling of a driver's performance. You can't outdrive a fundamentally slow car, no matter how psychologically resilient you are. Fernando Alonso is proving that at Aston Martin right now.
You can't outdrive a slow car, sure, but you can certainly underdrive a fast one, and that is what we are seeing across the grid.
Underdrive?
Yes. We need to remember why the 2026 regulations were implemented in the first place. They were designed to make these cars twitchy, challenging, and unforgiving.
To improve the racing spectacle?
They removed the aerodynamic safety nets specifically to put the race back in the driver's hands. They wanted to see who could handle a car that wants to snap on entry and slide on exit. And what is the actual result? Chaos. Safety cars. Drivers making unforced errors left and right.
Because the cars are hard to drive.
Exactly. You are looking at the upgrades and seeing an orderly progression of engineering. I am looking at the track and seeing a human mess. The fact that an upgrade might give you 1/10 of a second in the wind tunnel is completely irrelevant if the driver gets spooked by a snap of oversteer and loses 3/10 in a single corner because they lack confidence.
But you're missing the mechanism of how confidence is built.
Am I?
Yes, that 1/10 of a second in the wind tunnel is exactly what buys the driver the margin of safety. Let's talk about slip angle for a second, the difference between where the steering wheel is pointed and where the tires are actually traveling.
Okay, we're getting technical.
If your car produces more downforce efficiently, it tolerates a wider slip angle. The driver doesn't have to ride the absolute ragged edge of grip to achieve the lap time. The aero upgrades physically reduce the psychological burden.
In theory.
No, in practice, when McLaren brought their new floor to Miami, generating more loaded high speeds, Norris suddenly looked incredibly relaxed in the cockpit. He wasn't fighting the steering wheel through the fast sweeps, he was guiding it. The engineering solved the psychological problem.
Did it solve the psychological problem for Leclerc?
We just talked about
Ferrari's car generates massive downforce, yet he pushed too hard and crashed. Did it solve the problem for Verstappen? He had the fastest car in Sector 1, equipped with a brand new floor, and still spun on lap 1.
because he...
Engineering only provides potential. It is a theoretical construct until the driver physically actualizes it with their hands and feet. And in Miami, the human beings proved over and over again that they are the weak link in the chain.
Well, we've covered a tremendous amount of ground today, looking at both the telemetry traces and the psychological toll of this race.
We definitely did. It's a lot to unpack.
But looking at the hard evidence from the Miami Grand Prix, my view remains that aerodynamic upgrades and technical optimization are the absolute foundation of success. The fact that Red Bull, McLaren, and Williams all surged forward in the running order precisely when they introduced new aerodynamic packages is empirical proof that the wind tunnel dictates the reality of the racetrack. The machine sets the terms of engagement.
In my perspective is that the sheer volume of driver errors, spins, and psychological triumphs we witnessed proves human execution is the ultimate variable. A lighter chassis didn't make Colapinto brave, his mindset did. An aero upgrade didn't save Verstappen from spinning, his own human error caused it. The machine provides the canvas, but the race is still won and lost in the mind of the driver.
I think where we clearly converge, though, is on the brutal nature of these 2026 regulation adjustments.
Oh, 100%. They are vicious.
This rule set, which will remain the standard until 2030, has created an incredibly punishing environment. The margins have been shrunk to almost zero. We are seeing that neither a perfect car nor a perfect driver can succeed independently anymore.
You need both.
Right. The window for success is so microscopic that a slight miscalculation in the factory or a momentary lapse of concentration in the cockpit results in immediate, severe consequences.
It is absolutely a razor's edge. You can't just build a fast car in a vacuum. You have to build a fast car that the driver can actually mentally process and trust. And as we look ahead to the upcoming Canadian Grand Prix, where several teams are scheduled to bring their next wave of crucial upgrades, the pressure is only going to intensify.
Oh, Montreal is going to be fascinating.
The circuit Gilles Villeneuve is notoriously unforgiving. It's a high-speed track surrounded by concrete walls that punish exactly the kind of human errors we saw in Miami.
It will be the perfect arena to test these theories again. Will the new upgrades tame the cars and provide that vital margin of safety? Or will the drivers continue to crack under the strain of these demanding machines? We will leave that for you to decide.
It's going to be a wild weekend.
Definitely. As we sign off, remember the dichotomy of this sport. On one side, you have the telemetry trace, pure cold physics. On the other side, you have the heartbeat of the driver, pure volatile emotion. Somewhere in the violent collision of the two, we find the truth of Formula One.